Hi everyone, and welcome back to Away and Awake. Now today I wanted to just quickly chat about a simple idea, but I wonder what people think about it. And this relates to the idea of qualia, which are basically kind of conscious felt sensations of the world, which are difficult to pair to the physical world itself. So this question of just is consciousness a physical thing, or is it a separate thing? And there's a classic kind of conundrum that people talk about with this, which is if I look at a strawberry, as an example, and I see that it's red, and you look at a strawberry and you say, yes, it's also red, are we experiencing the same thing when we say that it's red? Or could we be experiencing something totally different? If I could put myself inside your mind, would I see the same thing, or would I see what I consider to be green, etc.? And this is, if you've followed anything to do with consciousness, you've probably seen this before. And I find it an unusual conundrum, or I find it unusual that there's so much confusion about this. It doesn't seem, my perspective on this seems fairly uncomplicated to understand. So we'll see what you guys think, and maybe I'm totally missing the point. So it seems that the general perception is that our default assumption would be that we see the same thing, but that the conundrum put to us is suggesting, well, maybe that assumption's not correct. But my own feeling is that the default assumption should be that we see different things, and you'd have to make a case for why we would see the same thing. And my reason for that is that sometimes when answering these questions, it's necessary to first actually go back to the question itself. So rather than resolving the answer, think about the terms in the question and see if you understand what you mean by them. So when I see red, do you see red? And the key question in here is the seeing. What do we mean by see? And if you think about that for a while, you might realize that's actually quite a difficult thing to define, what it means to see. And I'm not going to go into that whole discussion, but you might like to think about it. But I came to the conclusion at the end of my reasoning on this question that effectively what it means to see, or any other sense, or to have this effectively any conscious experience, it is a felt sensation. And you could give this lots of different names, emotion or feeling or whatever, but that's what it is. There's nothing special about seeing versus hearing versus tasting. They all create a state within the body and mind, or whatever you want to call that continuum. And so the question then is really, when I see red, does the state that it induces in me mirror the state that it induces in you? And to my mind, it's kind of obvious that would not be true. And a good way of demonstrating this by example is to swap out seeing, in this example, with tasting. And if we use that example, when two people taste the same strawberry, do they have the same experience? I mean, it's trivial to say that they don't, because we know that with food, people have vastly different preferences. And so, one person tastes the strawberry and says, yeah, I had an experience of that. And they might describe that as enjoyable, etc., etc. And another person might put it in the mouth and absolutely hate it to the point of spitting it out. Now, I think it's difficult to argue that those people tasted the same thing, or more accurately, experienced the same thing, experienced the same taste. Because at the end of it all that taste is doing is inducing an experience. What we really mean by taste is the experience that the organism has in reaction to the thing. So clearly, in the case of taste, we know that it's not possible that you could explain them as the same experience. You might think, well, they're not the same thing. Like, the fact that you don't like a thing doesn't mean that you're not experiencing the same thing and just having a different reaction to it. I think that you can't just disentangle reaction and experience. They're the same thing. That's what's your reaction is your experience, and by extension, two people reacting differently are having a different experience. So this is more obvious with taste than other senses, and so sight is a more subtle case where people aren't usually as repulsed by, say, a color. But nonetheless, the experience they have when they see a color has a kind of emotional valence to it. Like, there is an experience, and they will have subtle preferences around colors, subtle associations with colors that cause us the sensation to be of a particular nature, which will differ from somebody else. You can look at sight more clearly, ironically enough, with an example that is not relating to color. So, and this is again going to challenge perhaps some assumptions, but let's say we have a picture of a severed head, something really severe, and one person looks at that. Let's say it's a still from a horror film. One person who's a big horror fan looks at that and is completely nonplussed. They're fine with it. No, all good. Another is completely repulsed. Again, they're using sight. They're having a visual experience, just like with the strawberry. Are we going to say that they've had the same experience? Have they seen the same thing? Now, of course, they've seen in the sense that the physical thing they're looking at is the same. Yes, they're looking at the same object, but has their experience of sight been the same? And my feeling is it's obviously no, because their experience of sight is how they react. They're the same thing. So I think that's basically the point. That's all I really wanted to say. I wonder, there might have been a few other subtleties to add, but I wonder what people think of that. Am I missing the point? Most people, when I've raised this with a few people, and they kind of quite often will eventually come to understand what I'm saying, but we'll start off with objections on the basis that how you feel about a thing is not the same, like your emotional state is not the same as your experience, or is not the same as the seeing bit. But I really think you can't actually, when you drill it down, what do you mean by see? All that means is what is the change in state in that moment in the conscious entity. And those changes in state are self-evidently different. I mean, they're different physiologically because we know that people's bodies don't operate exactly the same way, but they're different experientially because of these radically different feelings we can get in response to the same stimulus. So there's a quick video. I tend to waffle, and this one's only 8 minutes, so I'm proud of myself. Thanks for being with me. Hopefully that was an interesting insight, and I definitely would like to hear what other people think about that. I by no means think that that's the definitive position on the thing, and it's obviously an age-old kind of paradox, I guess. But I guess I wanted to do this because I've never seen any video on this that describes it in the terms that I've just described it. They always frame it as, well, the default would obviously be that you're having the same experience, but what if we're not? Wouldn't that be mysterious? And I don't think it is. I think the mysterious thing would be if we're having the same experience. We'd have to try to understand, we'd have to really stretch to make a case to say the person who throws up in response to a strawberry and the person that jumps for joy is tasting in the same, is having the same taste. And I haven't been able to construe a definition of terms in that, or a logic that joins it all together that makes that make sense. So there we go. Thank you for joining me, and I'll be back again soon with some more tidbits of questions.